Time for another SQUINT podcast here on Sunday, May 2. Passage comes from Matthew chapter 16, verse 18. A very well-known passage of Scripture. Jesus is talking to Peter, and he asks his disciples, who do they say that Christ is? And mixed response, and then Jesus says to Peter, who do you say that I am, or that Christ is? And Peter says, you are the Christ, the anointed one, the Son of God. And Jesus replies to Peter and says, I tell you that you are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church, and the gates of hell, or Hades, will not overcome. Now, what I find interesting is a lot of people, when they look at this passage, there are some teachings that teach this is Peter and he is the head of the church. Okay, upon this rock I will build my church, and they get that interpretation. And but that's not really what Jesus is saying here. In fact, Jesus says, "You are Peter, and on this rock I will build my church." And so, when you look at that, Peter's name in the Greek is Petra, and it means a small stone. But then Jesus says, you are Peter, a small stone, and on this rock, and the word for rock is Petron, and it means a large rock, a monolith, huge rock. And what I believe that Jesus is saying to Peter, he says, you are Peter, a small stone, and upon this large rock. Well, what's the rock? It's not Peter, it's the rock of his confession that Jesus is the Messiah. He is the Christ, the anointed one, of whom God will build his church. And so, it's what I find true in this is, and I suppose you could say, You could say that Peter is the large rock also, okay? That he's telling Peter, you've been small, but now you're going to become large. I suppose that could be a rendering of this. And we certainly see that in Peter's life, that he was impetuous Peter, and he was Peter who denied the Lord. But then he rose and became the chief of the 12 apostles, really the leader, who was so outspoken and led 3,000 to Christ on the day of Pentecost. So I suppose you could look at it like that. But how I look at it, as I see the text, is the large rock, this monolith, is the rock of Jesus' confession, a rock of Peter's confession, that Jesus is the Messiah, the anointed one, the Son of God. And it's upon this confession, this fact that Jesus is the Messiah, that God is building his church, and Hades will not be able to overcome it. In other words, with Jesus as the foundation of the church, Jesus as the head of the church, that the church is a force in the world, and Hades cannot prevent it from doing what it's going to do. So then we have Peter's confession, his testimony about who Jesus is what we see here. So the testimony of Peter looms large. Why? Because the testimony is that Jesus is the Christ, the Messiah, the anointed one. And I wrote for my application, I desire to be used of God and let him speak through me. May my testimony of who Jesus is speak louder than who I am. I desire Jesus' work and ministry to completely overshadow me. And so that's how I look at this text, and that's how I apply it. And I hope that you take a look at this text and see how the Lord might speak to you through this. And I hope that this was somehow meaningful. Man, it's really beautiful today on May 2nd, and I'm excited to continue to share these podcasts. So I pray that you will be in the Word. That pretty soon I'll start another. Not another 20 days of prayer is coming in August, but soon I'll start another 30-day challenge of SOAP, of Bible reading, and journaling and then of course applying the Word to your life. And I hope that when we do start that, that'll probably be the 1st of June, that you'll engage with me on that. And I just really pray that God's blessing in your life, that you will grow in your faith. And I pray that these podcasts are helpful to help you grow in your faith so that your testimony can loom larger than who you are, because your testimony speaks of Jesus. All right? Have a fantastic week. We'll see you next week.